Mira Jensen always believed that the worst part of poverty was in the hunger or the sleepless nights, but the constant calculation, the endless mental math of how many hours she could stretch a dollar and how many excuses she could invent before the world noticed she was drowning. And on the night everything changed, she was sitting on the edge of her mattress in a cramped apartment where the walls carried every sound, rocking her infant son Noah against her chest while counting the seconds between his cries, praying they would space out enough for her heart to rest. Because she already knew the truth waiting for her in the kitchen, the formula tin nearly empty, the paycheck still days away, the landlord's reminder echoing in her inbox, and pride arguing viciously with survival, telling her she should figure it out alone like she always had. But when Noah's cry sharpened into something desperate, something that clawed straight into her chest, she gave up the argument and reached for her phone, meaning to text her brother. The only person she hated asking almost as much as she hated failing, and she typed quickly, explaining she just needed a small amount. Nothing dramatic, just enough to buy formula and get through the week, promising she'd repay it, swearing this was the last time, and without checking the number, without rereading the contact name, she sent the message and closed her eyes as if bracing for judgment, unaware that she had just crossed paths with a life so distant from hers that it might as well have belonged to another planet. Because several miles away, in a quiet office overlooking a city that sparkled for people who never noticed its shadows, Jackson Albright sat alone long after his staff had gone home, staring at spreadsheets that all said the same thing, while his instincts whispered that something was wrong. And when his phone vibrated with a message that clearly wasn't meant for him, his first reaction was irritation. But irritation faded quickly into something unfamiliar as he read words that weren't polished or manipulative, but tired, practical, and restrained, written by someone who hated asking but had no choice, and instead of deleting it like he did most interruptions, he read it again, then surprised himself by replying with a simple question, asking if the baby was okay, which startled Mira so badly she almost dropped the phone, her first instinct to apologize and retreat. But something about the lack of accusation slowed her down, leading to a brief exchange where she insisted it was a mistake and that she would manage. Only for Jackson to respond that mistakes didn't always have to end badly, offering help with no expectation. A line that made her laugh bitterly because expectations were the currency of her world. Yet exhaustion wore her defenses thin, and when Noah finally fell asleep against her shoulder, she did something she never did with strangers. She trusted them just enough to tell the truth, sharing how much she actually needed, expecting either silence or a token amount, and when the notification appeared showing a deposit far larger than anything she had ever held, panic surged through her faster than relief, because money that big never came without consequences, and she tried to send it back, insisting it was too much. that it had to be a mistake, but Jackson's reply was firm and calm, telling her to keep it, to take care of her son. And what unsettled her most wasn't the generosity, but the precision, the way he remembered Noah's name, the way he asked questions that showed he was paying attention, not collecting gratitude. And sleep avoided her that night as fear and hope wrestled inside her chest. Until the next morning, when a knock at her door revealed stacks of boxes filled with essentials she hadn't even thought to ask for, along with a short note written without flourish, saying that no child should have to negotiate hunger. And as Mira sat on the floor, surrounded by proof that this was real, not a dream or a scam, curiosity finally overpowered caution, and she searched Jackson's name, discovering the scale of the world he lived in, a billionaire whose company influenced industries she had once studied before life rerouted her plans. And when she confronted him about why he was doing this, expecting a speech or an excuse, he answered with a truth that felt heavier than charity, telling her he knew what it was like to miss something important because the people around you were too busy pretending everything was fine. And when their conversation drifted unexpectedly toward her abandoned career in diagnostics and data analysis, he didn't offer pity, he offered curiosity, inviting her to visit his company not as a recipient of help, but as a professional whose perspective might matter. And fear nearly kept her from going. But something inside her refused to stay invisible, so days later she walked into a glass tower with Noah strapped against her chest, feeling like an imposter until she noticed that the space prepared for her wasn't temporary or awkward but intentional, complete with a small nursery and flexible hours that acknowledged her reality rather than pretending it didn't exist. And when she finally met Jackson face to face, she didn't see a savior or a villain, but a man who carried the weight of decisions that affected thousands. And when he offered her a trial role with autonomy and respect, she accepted not because of gratitude, but because he treated her competence as a given, and once immersed in Helix Core S systems, her mind reawakened. Spotting inconsistencies, others dismissed patterns hidden beneath clean reports, numbers that technically balanced but emotionally felt wrong. And as she dug deeper, she uncovered quiet manipulation threaded through the company. Finances, a theft designed to look like efficiency. And when she brought it to Jackson, he didn't react with disbelief or ego, but with relief, confirming a suspicion he'd carried alone. And together they worked carefully, collecting evidence while maintaining appearances, until the person responsible attempted to turn the narrative, framing Mira as unstable and Jackson as reckless, underestimating the resolve of a woman who had learned to survive without safety nets. And when the investigation concluded and the truth surfaced, the betrayal collapsed under its own weight, leaving behind a company forced to confront what it had ignored. And through it all, Mira never forgot how easily this future could have never existed, how one unsent message or one unanswered reply could have left her right where she started. And when Jackson offered her a permanent leadership role, she accepted it without apology, understanding now that accepting opportunity wasn't the same as begging for rescue. And months later, as she tucked Noah into bed in a home filled with quiet rather than fear, she received a message from Jackson containing the screenshot of that first accidental text, labeled simply "The Beginning." And when he asked her what she believed that night meant, she replied that sometimes life doesn't change because someone is powerful, but because someone listens, and for the first time since motherhood, had reduced her world to survival alone. Mira slept, knowing she hadn't been saved by a stranger. She had been recognized, and that recognition had rewritten everything.